Thanks, Bernie. Good afternoon. It's 10 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Laura Di Battista. This is Here and Now.
Here and Now.
99.1 FM.
Coming up on our program this afternoon, Toronto is talking about hydration today. Bottles of water are being given out by the case by volunteers to prevent dehydration in this extreme heat alert. We'll find out how people are coping. And don't bother blotting if you're feeling sweaty this summer. Science says that your sweat is one of the best ways to keep you cool. We'll hear why when we get a primer on perspiration. And no librarians shushing patrons at this library event. It's a speed dating session for the LGBT community. We'll listen in. Well, as I mentioned, the city has issued another extreme heat alert today, and that warning brings concerns about hydration and heat illness. When it comes to Toronto's homeless, summer dehydration is as much of a threat as exposure is in the winter. So today, Project Water, along with hundreds of volunteers, are going to be distributing over 300,000 bottles of H2O throughout the city. Anne-Marie Batten is a street nurse volunteering with the organization. We've reached her at a distribution point at Shooter and Church, where they're currently handing out lots of water. Good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon.
Well, as I mentioned, not as hot today, but still quite warm. How's the giveaway going?
It's going very well. We've gone into the park near the Metropolitan United Church, which actually is a park that has a fair amount of shade. So there are a lot of people gathered here, and we've handed out 3 cases of water since we came down here. And then we went to St. James Park, and we passed out a lot more.
What's the response been?
All people are so grateful. It's really tough in the summer, and people tend to come to the parks for the level of shade, but there's a lot of older people here with chronic medical conditions that are quite at risk. There's some of the homeless community that are staying here, and overall the response has been very positive.
So what areas of the city are you focusing on?
Right now, we're down here just east of Yonge, and in a few minutes, we're going to head over towards City Hall and the area around the Osgood Courthouse. I'm a street nurse, so I work down doing outreach in this area. So just because of doing outreach myself, I know some of the places people hang out. So that's where we're headed.
What kind of heat effects do you see out there on the street?
We have a lot of dehydration, and people are quite at risk in the summer, and I don't know that we talk about that as much as we do for when people are out in the cold. We know people can freeze to death, but I don't think we're as aware of the danger that people have with heat. So there's a lot of dehydration. A lot of diabetics get dehydrated. The sugars aren't very, they can kind of get out of whack. We're finding people sleeping, so it's a little bit of an assessment to see if they're sleeping just because they're tired or if they're unwell.
And are they going to cooling centers? Does that help?
People do go to cooling centers, but I find there's a large population that won't access a cooling center, and some people really don't have the transportation to get to a cooling center, and folks that may have a mental illness may not feel comfortable going in where there's a crowd. So even though we promote that, I find that there's still a lot of people that don't go.
Is rehydrating a person who's dehydrated as simple as giving them a bottle of water?
It depends on the level of illness. Mm-hmm. For someone who's just feeling a little unwell, certainly it can be a help. And if it's someone I'm concerned about, I would get them help. People can also deteriorate really quickly. So if it's someone with an underlying medical condition, sometimes a more complete assessment needs to be done.
And how do you recognize the signs? You mentioned some people sleep. What other kind of signs do you watch out for?
Yeah, and sleeping's actually a bit of a risk because one of the signs is people becoming dizzy and fainting. So sometimes we can check pulses. If they have a rapid pulse, we worry. If they're breathing more rapidly, if they're sweating a lot, if their skin is flushed. And really the point where it's really an acute medical emergency is when people are no longer sweating. And they may be slipping in and out of consciousness. But when you see the sweating stop, that's a very dangerous sign.
So got a bit of a respite today. It's not as hot. Tomorrow, though, is supposed to be a scorcher, upwards of 45 with the humidex. What are you going to be doing differently tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow I'm actually back at my job, and I'm a street health nurse. So tomorrow I actually will be out on street outreach again in the afternoon. So I'm actually going to come back to these same parks and to these areas, and we take water out onto the streets as well and just assess people.
Is it just one bottle you're giving to people, or is that enough?
We've actually given one lady about 3 bottles. We were sitting with her for a while, and then we found a man who had some other medical problems. So we've sent him over to where there's a nurse clinic nearby. So we have actually been able to intervene in a few cases.
How can ordinary people just walking by help out during a heat wave?
I think it's really important to just not walk by people. You know, just stop and say hello, see if someone's okay. Generally speaking, people are appreciative of the help. And if you're concerned at all and it looks like someone's very unwell, there's nothing wrong with calling for help. And if it's a really hot day or an extreme heat alert, you can call 911 if you're concerned, because you might not know that the person's diabetic or has an underlying condition. If it's a case of just needing to get someone to shelter or to a cooling center, you can call 311, and that's the program that the city has to actually get people transported.
And you'll come and take care of it, will you?
I would try if I could.
All right. Well, I'm sure you're going to be very busy over the next few days. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for letting me talk.
All right. We appreciate the work you do. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Anne-Marie Batten is a street nurse working with Project Water to distribute water to at-risk populations in the GTA. And if you're sweating in this hot weather, even with a bottle of water in your hand, stay tuned.